What is the Rust Belt? Welcome back to the Learn English podcast, the podcast teaching English in context so you can learn naturally. On today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about the country that I live in, which is the United States. The United States is a very large country. It has about 330 million people that live in it. And there is a phrase that you will hear when people talk about the different regions in the US. You will hear things like north, south, east, and west when we talk about the directions, but there's something called the different belts of the United States. Have you ever heard that before? Do you know what that means? On today's episode, I want to talk about these different belts that we have, and that way you will understand when people mention them, when people talk about these particular geographical regions of the United States. So if you're interested in learning more about this, well, of course, practicing your listening comprehension, then follow along because we're about to begin. Before we get started, I want to remind you to look at the description of this podcast episode. There you will find the list of words and phrases that I used in the episode so you can take them, study them, and improve your English vocabulary. Now let's talk about these belts. The first thing that I just want to say is that when we talk about a belt, usually we're talking about a strip of material of some sort. The most common use of the word belt is a piece of material or leather that goes around your waist and it helps keep your pants from falling down. But there's also belts in machines. For example, we have a conveyor belt. That is the part that moves in factories and moves products along. Or there's also belts in your car. When you look at machines like a car or an airplane or something that has an engine, you might see a piece of material that moves, and that is called a belt. Now, when we're talking about the belts of the United States, we don't mean a piece of material. What we mean is a large strip of land that covers multiple states. This is a way of talking about a geographical area of the US that has something in common. You will hear this belt part referred to by people, especially during elections. You will hear it when people are talking about certain areas that politicians are campaigning in or certain states are voting in a particular way. But there's other meanings and there's other times where people talk about these belts as well. So in today's episode, I really want to talk about these different belts so you can get an idea of what we're talking about. Let's start with the first belt, and that is the rust belt. Rust, when you talk about rust, it is something that is orange or copper brown in color, and it's what happens to metal when it is exposed to the air. So, for example, if you have a metal fence and you notice that over time it turns from a silver color to more of a brown color, that's because the fence is rusting. The rust belt has to do with that, and it really comes from this idea of an area of the United States that was known for manufacturing, particularly with cars. The Rust Belt is in the Northwest and Midwest of the United States, states such as Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Illinois. The reason that it is called the Rust Belt is because this particular section of the United States at one point was known for industry and manufacturing. This was especially true for steel and for cars or automobiles. States such as Pennsylvania, specifically in places like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, there were a lot of steel mills. The steel was manufactured, it was sent around the country, it was used to make skyscrapers, such as the skyscrapers of New York City, for example. And that had a lot of jobs associated with it and a lot of manufacturing plants associated with it. Another place is Michigan, especially Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, 100 years ago in the 1920s, was famous for being the place where Ford and Chrysler and Dodge, these big American car companies, started and grew their factories. This brought a lot of wealth because these companies became very popular. They employed a lot of people to manufacture automobiles to sell across the country. And the city of Detroit was known for being this very rich city, a very modern city with a lot of job opportunities. Now, the reason this area is called the Rust Belt is because it's no longer this pretty shiny metal. Instead, it's something that's rusted. It's something that's gotten old and kind of decayed a little bit. When Americans think of Detroit, for example, they don't think of this beautiful modern city anymore. Detroit has really become known as a place that is a little bit dangerous, is poor, is a city that's dying in a way because a lot of people left, the car manufacturers left, and it just doesn't have that good reputation. Now, that might not be entirely accurate, but that's what people think. A lot of people do live in Detroit. A lot of people have tried to improve Detroit and make it a really great city. So I'm not saying that Detroit is a bad city or anything, but that's the stereotype. When manufacturing moved to other countries overseas, when US production of steel and automobiles went down, these places lost their jobs. People did not have the same opportunities anymore. And that led to a lot of wealth being lost and a lot of people not being able to find good paying jobs or the same types of jobs that were available before. For example, the rapper Eminem is from Detroit, and I think almost 20 years ago now, he had a movie called 8 Mile that was set in the city of Detroit, and it really was trying to show a side of Detroit that wasn't really glamorous anymore. He was a character in the movie who worked in a factory, but the area was very poor. Like I said, there are people who are trying to revitalize the area. So revitalize means grow it again, bring in new economic opportunities, make it a good place to live. There has definitely been a push for that in Detroit, and I know other cities as well because a lot of cities have had declining population. That is why it is called the Rust Belt. Sadly, there's also another belt that is tied to the Rust Belt that is correlated with the Rust Belt, which means it covers the same area and it is called the Parkinson's belt. Now, the Parkinson's belt refers to the disease Parkinson's. Parkinson's is a neuromuscular disease, which means that there is a problem with the amount of dopamine in your brain, and it causes you to not be able to move as you would like to. There are some celebrities who had Parkinson's or have Parkinson's. For example, the boxer Muhammad Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's. He was kind of known for having this hand shake uncontrollably. Another celebrity is Michael J. Fox. He was on the TV show Family Ties back in the 80s. He was also in the Back to the Future movies, if you have seen any of those. He is someone who has spent a lot of time to bring awareness to Parkinson's. The reason why I say these two belts are correlated with each other is that there are a lot of people diagnosed with Parkinson's who live in these Rust Belt areas. It has not been proven that manufacturing caused this increase in Parkinson's, but it is one of the theories that all of these manufacturing plants caused some type of pollution or toxin to be in the environment. It damaged people's health and caused this increase in Parkinson's. There is still more research into it to try to figure what exactly happened, why this is occurring, but sadly, that is one of the side effects, maybe. That might be one of the consequences for having this high amount of manufacturing in this particular part of the United States. Our next belt is the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt refers to the states that have a lot of sunshine. In the northern part of the United States, the states that border Canada, those states have snow. They have cold weather during the winter. Think of Seattle or New York, for example. When you go to the southern part of the United States, the states that are closer to Mexico, you don't have that as much. You have a lot of states that get a lot of sunshine throughout the year. When you look at the Sun Belt goes from Florida all the way through the southern part of the United States. So I can say that I am someone who lives in the Sun Belt. Where I live in Southern California, it almost never rains. It rains for maybe a few weeks in total throughout the year, maybe a few weeks a year. Almost never snows. I have seen snow twice in my lifetime. Where I am, it is extremely sunny. So it's only the southern part of California that's in that sun belt. If you go to San Francisco, if you go to Northern California, that is not considered to be part of the Sun Belt, but the southern half of the United States is. The Sun Belt is very popular with retirees. So people who live in northern states, once they are able to retire, a lot of them will move to these warmer climates. They might move to Florida. That is one of the states that's the most popular with people who are older and retired. They could also go to places like Texas or Arizona because you do get that warmer weather. Unlike the states in the Rust Belt, the states in the Sun Belt tend to have really good economies. Texas, Florida, and especially California all have very strong economies. California currently, when I'm recording this, is the fourth largest economy in the world. The United States, of course, has the strongest economy, but there's two other countries and then California. So the Sun Belt tends to be a place that people do move to, that has a lot of economic opportunity, and that have increasing populations, which is really the opposite of the Rust Belt. Our next belt is the Bible Belt. The Bible Belt refers to the area of the United States that is very heavily Christian. This is the part of the United States where there are a lot of people who identify as Christian, which is where it gets that name from, Bible Belt. But specifically, they are Protestant Christians and not Catholics. This is the part of the United States that we call the South. So when there was the American Civil War, there were two sides, the North and the South. The South is where this Bible Belt area tends to be concentrated. Usually, when you're referring to the Bible Belt, you're looking at states in between Texas, Florida, and Virginia. There's some states that are in between those ones, and that's really where you get this high concentration of Protestant Christians. The stereotype about the Bible Belt is that if you go to a Bible Belt town, a small town, you will find multiple churches. Everyone will be wearing some type of cross necklace, that the church attendance rate is really, really high, and people just identify as Christian. That is the stereotype. That's the joke that kind of gets told, that this is a very religious area of the United States. Because it does have that strong Christian influence, this is the part of the United States that is the most politically conservative. These states that are in the Bible Belt almost always vote Republican, which is the conservative side of the political spectrum here in the US. Because they are conservative, because of the Christian influence, you will find laws that are very strict on abortion. It is very difficult, if not completely banned, to get an abortion in these states. You also have very strict gun laws. Not that you can't have guns. Usually, these are the places where you can easily buy guns and people will walk around with guns. I don't know, I guess that's very Christian. And this is also the area where you will find more lax child labor laws, which means that children are able to start working sometimes as young as 14 years old. Now, like the Rust Belt, the Bible Belt is also correlated with some other belts. Again, like the Rust Belt, these are not great things. So there are two other belts. One is called the Stroke Belt, and one is called the Diabetes Belt. A stroke is when you have something wrong with the arteries in your brain. Either they rupture, which means they kind of tear, or they get clogged and blood can't go through. So in either case, the blood does not go completely to your brain. It is a medical emergency. You have to get treated right away for it. When we talk about diabetes, diabetes is when you have very high blood sugar. You usually need some type of medication or maybe some type of injection to bring your blood sugar down. And those two belts are correlated with the Bible Belt. The reason is that these Bible Belt states are in the South. That part of the country tends to be the most poor and have the worst health outcomes. People who live in the South tend to be the most obese, the most unhealthy, the ones who live the shortest amount of time compared to people who live in other states. Part of that is due to the diet of the area. The South is known for having really good food, having a lot of food that is high in fat, high in calories, and usually it's like that because it is deep fried. So you take something and you fry it in oil, which makes it taste really good, but can also be very unhealthy. So Southern cuisines, the food of the South, tends to be higher in calories, higher in fat, higher in sugar, For example, one of the drinks that's popular is something called sweet tea. It is tea and it's sweet because it has a lot of sugar in it. So normally you think of drinking tea as being healthy, but if you have Southern sweet tea, it is extremely sweet. It's almost like drinking soda. It's very, very sweet. Now, I'm not trying to say everyone eats like that. I am not trying to say that everyone is obese or unhealthy if they live in the South. I'm just saying, in general, it does tend to have the worst health outcomes for any group of people in the United States. The other part that causes the diabetes belt and the stroke belt and this health problem there is that because the southern part of the United States tends to be pretty poor, there's not a lot of hospitals. There's a lot of rural areas. So when you have a rural area, you tend not to have a lot of hospitals. You don't have a lot of access to high quality health care. And when you look at these conservative states, they tend to be the places that do not support government provided insurance or government programs for people who are very poor. And then you have less hospitals as a result. So when you combine diet and the poor economic conditions and the lack of hospitals, you get these bad health outcomes. Another factor that plays into that is also the racial makeup. The highest concentration of African Americans in the United States is in the Deep South. That comes from slavery because the southern states were the states that enslaved people, and the Civil War was fought over the factor of slavery. And sadly, in the United States, African Americans tend to have poor health outcomes, tend to have a lot of health problems, again, because of poverty, because of lack of resources, not having access to healthcare. All of that really combines to give these other two belts, along with the Bible belt, of having the stroke belt and the diabetes belt as well. And our last belt is tornado belt. Now, this isn't usually called tornado belt. It's actually usually called tornado alley. This is the central part of the United States over states like Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. This particular stretch of land is known for a high frequency of tornadoes, especially in the spring and summertime. The reason that tornadoes are common here has to do with the weather patterns of the United States. When weather combines from different types of climate, it can become very unstable and can cause these tornadoes. So you will have thunderstorms, you will have very severe weather all of a sudden. And one of the things that can occur is a tornado. There have been TV shows and movies about tornadoes. There was a reality TV show called Storm Chasers, which followed different people who would actually follow tornadoes, who would want to be near a tornado so they could get scientific data or so they could get video of it. That show was actually canceled because there were some accidents with the people who were storm chasing. And there's also movies about this. So there was a movie called Twister from the 90s that was about storm chasers, again, people who follow these tornadoes. And they recently redid that, I think last year, maybe, maybe last year. An updated version of that movie came out. Updated version is not good. I would not recommend it, but you can watch it if you would like to, or you can watch the original 90s one, which I think is a little bit better. And that kind of gives you an idea. Of course, in the movies, the tornado is very dramatic, but tornadoes definitely cause a lot of damage. Sometimes they are short and kind of disappear right away, but sometimes you get these really, really bad tornadoes and they can destroy entire towns. They can hurt people. People die in tornadoes. So it is something to be aware of. It is a very real danger for people who live there. And it is a belt technically, but like I said, it is usually just referred to as Tornado Alley. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned something about the different geographical regions of the United States. And I hope you know what people are referring to when they say these things. I will say that I heard the term Rust Belt when I was maybe 16 years old, and I had no clue what that even was. So sometimes Americans don't even know what these things are, but you do hear them in conversation. You will hear these different terms, especially if you're watching the news. People will talk about Tornado Alley or the Sun Belt or the Rust Belt. So you definitely do hear these terms. And if someone says them to you, now you know what they're talking about. Now you know the general area that they're referring to when they talk about these different things. If you want more episodes like this, if you want to know more about the United States, the different areas of the United States, please leave a comment. Tell me about it if you would like more episodes like this in the future. And if you are just enjoying the podcast overall, if it is helping you learn English, then please consider leaving us a rating on whatever app you are using to listen to this podcast on. You can tell a friend, tell a family member, tell someone who is learning English so we can continue to grow our audience. You can also follow us on social media at Learn English Pod. The website is learnenglishpod.com. And remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next episode when it comes out next week. Until then, keep learning English.